My name is Ethan, and these are the final lines I will ever write in a diary that, I swear, never belonged to anyone still living. The moment I touched it, a freezing shock crawled up my arm, not the cold of an object left in the dark, but the cold of a hand reaching up from beneath the earth, gripping my wrist with dead fingers. I never understood why I picked it up that night, but from the instant I did, my life was pulled into a chain of events so terrifying that even recalling them now makes the blood in my veins feel like ice. The diary's cover was made of old, burned leather, edges scorched as if exposed to fire, and at its center was a sigil I had never seen before. It resembled the head of some faceless creature, nothing but hollow darkness where features should have been, like a gateway into an endless void. When I opened the first page, the room instantly dropped to a bone-freezing temperature. I could see my breath fogging in the air, drifting like ghostly smoke. The first line was written in a dark, congealed ink that looked disturbingly like dried blood. It claimed that this diary only opened when a new soul stepped onto the boundary between life and death. As I stared at the words, I felt movement behind me, slow, deliberate, impossible to ignore. I spun around but saw nothing except the light bulb flickering violently, flashing in erratic bursts that carved thin, stuttering shadows across the room. And then I saw it. A tall, thin figure stood in the corner, its body hazy and distorted, its presence more a shape than a person. When the light blinked again, the figure was closer. My heart hammered against my ribs so violently it hurt. The diary's pages started flipping on their own as if blown by an unseen wind, yet the air was utterly still. The rustling pages sounded like whispers meant only for the dead, not the living. I tried to throw the diary away, but my hands were locked in place, frozen by some invisible force that clamped around my joints, refusing to let me move. The second page began to write itself. I didn't blink, I couldn't. Letters carved onto the paper as though dragged by sharp, invisible claws. Each stroke appeared slowly, deliberately, like something in the dark was etching its message, one painful cut at a time. The page declared that the previous owner of the diary had died, their soul unable to pass on, trapped inside these pages, and now the diary needed a new soul to sustain itself. A shiver ran through my spine when the final sentence formed, stating bluntly that the shadow behind me was the sign I had already been chosen. Footsteps creaked on the wooden floor, slow and heavy. I felt cold breath on the back of my neck. My muscles locked again as panic surged through me. I didn't want to look behind me, but my body betrayed me. I turned. Every light in the room went out at once. Darkness swallowed me whole thick, suffocating, absolute. In that suffocating black, a whisper brushed against my ear. It was hollow, ancient, resonating with the sound of earth shifting in graves. Chilling scares wrapped around every word as it told me I had seen too much, read too far, and now the diary wanted a new owner. A freezing hand gripped my shoulder, and when I turned, I saw its face, if it could be called a face. Pale, stretched skin, no eyes, only two pitch-black cavities staring directly into my soul. I stood frozen in that suffocating darkness as the eyeless face hovered inches from mine, the cold radiating from it burning into my skin like frostbite. The stench of damp earth and ancient rot seeped from its breath, making my throat tighten. I wanted to scream, but my voice was trapped somewhere deep inside my chest, trembling, refusing to come out. It was only then that I understood this creature was not a ghost, nor the spirit of a dead person, but something far older, something born from the boundary between life and death itself. Bound to the cursed diary I had touched, I stumbled backward, my legs shaking uncontrollably, but every time I retreated a step, it advanced one, slow, patient, as if savoring my terror. My arms refused to lift, heavy as stone, leaving me helpless and forced to stare into those endless hollow sockets, two pits of pure darkness that swallowed all light. Then, without warning, it vanished. Not a sound, not a trace. The air grew lighter, yet the silence thickened in an unnatural way, as if the room itself was holding its breath. My hands fumbled for my phone, and the dim flashlight flickered to life, casting weak light through the room. The diary lay open on the floor, pages turning again on their own. Though the air was completely still, words carved themselves into the paper, but this time they came fast, violent strokes slashing across the page as though written by something desperate or enraged. It told me the previous owner had died, but their soul had remained trapped within the diary, unable to move on, and now it needed another soul to replace them. My heart froze when I read the final line. It claimed that Ethan had already been marked. A sudden crash behind me made my pulse skyrocket. A shadow darted across the wall, then another, then dozens. They circled me, racing along the walls in twisted, unnatural movements. I spun around, trying to track them, but each one vanished the moment the flashlight touched it. It felt like they were playing with me, teasing me, pushing me toward panic. A raspy, metallic laugh echoed from the corner of the room, long and sharp like nails scraping down a steel surface. My breath quickened as my skin crawled. I swept the light across the wall, and what I saw rooted me in place. Someone had written on the wall in a deep, wet red substance still dripping onto the floor. The letters spelled out, "Ethan has been chosen. Ethan has opened the door. Ethan will not escape." Every stroke looked freshly made, as if someone had traced the words moments before I turned around. I spun again, desperate, but the room was empty, except for the pulsing darkness and the faint whisper of something breathing. I could feel the creature's presence pressing in on me, feeding on my fear, waiting for the exact moment my mind broke so it could take whatever it wanted. I reached for the door, but as my fingers touched the handle, I jerked my hand back instantly. A glowing symbol, the same one etched on the diary's cover, burned faintly on the metal, like hot embers. A crackling sound came from inside the wall, a vein-like fracture fracture snaked across the plaster, widening as if something behind it was pushing outward. Then a pale, bony hand forced its way through the gap, the fingers bent at impossible angles, bones snapping as they squeezed through an opening far too small. Another hand emerged on the opposite wall, then another, dozens of skeletal, ghost-pale arms pushed through the walls, reaching toward me as though desperate to drag me somewhere light could not follow. The air thickened, pressing down on my lungs as I backed away. My eyes darted around the room. Every escape route was closing. The only thing left untouched was the diary resting on the floor, its pages trembling like it was breathing. My instinct screamed at me that if I didn't confront it now, every other path would lead straight to death. Heart pounding, I forced myself forward. My knees almost gave out, but I bent down and grasped the diary. A low growl rumbled through the room, a sound too deep to belong to anything human. The moment I turned the page, the floor trembled violently, as though something massive moved beneath it. New words carved themselves across the page, declaring that the only way to survive was to write down the truth of what I saw. The diary only accepted the testimonies of those who had touched the darkness firsthand. If I refused to write, the diary would write for me with my blood. My trembling fingers closed around a pen lying beside the diary, though I had no idea where it came from. As soon as the tip touched the page, the room fell silent, unnaturally silent, and then the whispers began. Not one voice, dozens, layered, echoing, as if a chorus of trapped souls spoke from inside the pages. They told me I had only one night to finish writing every detail before the diary sealed itself shut and took my soul with it. The moment the pen touched the page, I felt an unseen force wrap around my hand, guiding each stroke as if it wanted to control what I wrote. The room around me twisted, stretching and warping like reality itself was being pulled by something that did not belong to this world. The wooden floor groaned underneath me, not from my movement, but as though the entire house was breathing, expanding and contracting just to observe me more closely. With every sentence I wrote, I felt hundreds of invisible eyes watching, waiting, judging. As soon as I finished the first line, a freezing wind swept through the room, even though all the windows were tightly shut. The small lamp in the corner flickered violently and then died, leaving only the faint glow coming from the pages of the diary. Darkness swallowed the room completely, thick and suffocating, and I realized I was trapped in a space that no longer obeyed the laws of reality. From somewhere deep within the shadows came a faint clicking sound, like brittle bones knocking together. It started soft but grew louder, closer. Deliberate something was crawling out of the darkness toward me. I tried to keep my gaze locked on the page, desperate to keep writing as the diary demanded, but the clicking grew sharper, joined by a low, raspy breath moving slowly across the room. My pulse pounded painfully in my ears. Finally, I couldn't hold myself back any longer. I looked up. A massive shadow stood in the corner. It had no clear shape, only a thick mass of darkness condensed into a humanoid form. Strands of shadow hung from its head like hair, writhing and twisting like living tendrils. The dim glow from the diary illuminated just enough of its face for me to see the hollows where its eyes should have been, two bottomless pits, pulling the warmth straight from my body. My chest tightened under the weight of its stare. I stumbled backward instinctively, but the diary slammed against my hand as if commanding me to continue. The pages trembled with a low rumbling sound, like a creature groaning in hunger. I had no idea what would happen if I stopped writing, but every instinct screamed at me that stopping meant death. Swallowing my terror, I lowered my gaze and forced myself to keep writing. The shadow did not move at first. It stood perfectly still, yet the air around it vibrated in faint waves, like silent, mocking laughter. When I reached the third line, the shadow began to move, but it didn't walk. It slid across the floor, stretching and shrinking in unnatural pulses, its form rippling as though it were being dragged. With every glide forward, the wooden floor beneath me shook as if something colossal was crawling beneath the boards. My concentration broke for a single second, and the diary let out a sharp metallic screech like claws raking across stone. The letters on the page distorted, melting and twisting because I had paused. Panicking, I resumed writing, the pen trembling between my fingers. The instant the line was complete, a scream tore through the room. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't the shadows. It was someone else, someone inside the pages. The scream carried layers of agony, despair, and terror so raw that my bones shook. It echoed from every corner of the room, as if the soul behind it was being ripped apart while I listened. I fell back, breath shuddering, but my legs wouldn't move. The wall behind me split open with a sharp crack. From within the gap, dozens of pale hands pushed through. They were thin, skeletal, their fingers bent like hooks, reaching blindly into the air. One brushed against my hair, cold as the void, and a shock of fear shot through my body. I ducked instinctively, covering my head, but the diary forced my other hand forward, making me continue writing. The hands didn't attack me. They were trying to pull me toward the crack, as if inviting me into a world where light no longer existed. More appeared, human ones, bestial ones, some stretched unnaturally long, joints twisted at impossible angles as if broken 100 times. Some were covered in coarse hair, others were skinless, only raw tendons and exposed bone. The sight made my stomach lurch. The diary vibrated violently in my grip, as if caught in a storm. Though the room remained sealed tight, the next line seared itself onto the page, not written in ink, but burned into the paper with glowing marks like molten metal. The heat radiating from it made me jerk the pen back. The message was clear. If I stopped, the hands would drag my soul into the walls, and I would become one of the screams echoing inside the diary. There was no escape. I had to write. To survive. I took a shaking breath, pushed the fear down my throat, and forced my hand to keep moving. I wrote every detail, every sound, every shadow creeping along the walls. With each new sentence, The towering shadow retreated slightly, as though the story itself was pushing it back, but only if I kept writing without interruption. Every hesitation made it advance again, closer, hungrier. My hand burned with pain, but I didn't dare stop. The darkness around me continued to thicken, exploding outward across the walls and ceiling, like a living organism expanding its territory. I could feel the weight of countless unseen souls pressing in, whispering, waiting. They needed me to finish the story, and the night was far from over. I kept writing, the pen trembling so violently it felt like it might leap out of my hand. Every word I put on the page seemed to crack another layer of reality around me, twisting the room further into something warped and breathing. The walls quivered softly, as if enormous lungs were expanding behind them, each breath releasing a deep, mournful groan like the lament of countless trapped souls. I could no longer tell which sounds were real and which were coming from inside my mind. Whenever I glanced toward the corner, the large shadow was still standing there, unmoving, yet I could swear it grew a little bigger every time I blinked. A loud crack erupted overhead. Dust rained down onto my shoulders. I looked up to see fresh fractures spreading across the ceiling like black veins, dripping a thick, tar-like liquid. It hit the floor with heavy, wet splatters, and the stench was unbearable. A rotting, suffocating odor, like a corpse sealed in a room for decades. I instinctively pulled back, but the diary burned hot against my hand, warning me not to stop. My grip tightened around the pen, my palm slick with sweat. The moment I added another line, the entire floor shuddered beneath me, the vibration rippling like waves. Behind me came the dragging footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate. I turned my head inch by inch, breath trapped in my throat. Another figure had appeared, not the massive one. This one was tall and impossibly thin, its limbs too long, its posture bent at unnatural angles. It looked as though it had crawled out of the widening crack in the wall. Its skin was stretched thin over jutting bones, so tight I could see the shape of its skeleton underneath. Its head hung crookedly to one side as if its neck had snapped long ago, and its hollow, pupilless eyes locked straight onto me. Two empty caverns filled with nothing but darkness. It moved closer with twitching, jerking motions, each step accompanied by a disturbing shudder through its entire body. The gate was unstable, broken, yet the speed at which it closed the distance was terrifying. I slammed the pen to the page, forcing myself to continue writing. The diary emitted a low, pulsating hum like a heartbeat, and for a moment, the creature paused, as though something unseen had grabbed hold of it, but then it resumed its advance. I backed away toward the wall near the door, still writing, my eyes glued to the creature. Suddenly, the wall behind me turned ice cold, so cold I jerked forward instinctively. I spun around, and dozens of hands began forming from the surface, pressed shapes pushing outward, as though countless people were slamming their palms from the other side. Some were small like a child's, some were massive, belonging to grown men. All of them pounded against the wall, creating a deafening thud, thud, thud. As if trying to break through and grab me. My heart dropped into my stomach. I bolted back toward the center of the room. The thin creature was now only a few steps away. As its long, skeletal arms stretched toward me, I scribbled a full sentence as fast as I could. A faint red light burst from the page. A burst of unseen force slammed into the creature, throwing it backward into the wall with a crack so sharp it sounded like bones shattering. But it stood up again, effortless, unharmed. Its head tilted even further, the movement slow and deliberate, like it was savoring the moment before it attacked. From the ceiling, the black liquid continued dripping steadily, each drop sounding heavier than the last. Then the voices began. Not one voice, not two, hundreds. They whispered in perfect unison, seeping out of the walls, the floor, the ceiling, and from every crack splitting across the room. They whispered my name. Ethan, Ethan, Ethan. Each repetition dimmed the room a little more, and I felt a light pull on my body, as if something was gently tugging me toward the dark chorus. I kept writing each strokes, slicing through the thickening air. The pen raced across the page so fast, my wrist felt like it might snap. And then, for the first time since I touched the diary, a line appeared that I did not write. Dark, oily letters formed themselves slowly across the page. It said the diary's true owner was waking up, and he was hungry. A cold wave rolled down my spine. I hesitated just 1 second. A single, small second. It was enough. The massive shadow in the corner released a deep, earth-rattling growl, a sound that seemed to crawl up from beneath the foundations of the house. It no longer stood still. It began sliding forward, expanding, stretching, consuming the room like a tide of living darkness. The thin creature dropped to all fours and charged at me like a starving animal. I wrote in pure desperation, the pen smashing into the paper like a frantic heartbeat. Each word glowed with faint light, pushing back the darkness only for an instant. But I understood something now with absolute clarity. If I stopped writing, I would die. If I slowed down, I would die. If the darkness reached me, I would no longer be human. And the night had only just begun. I was writing in such a panicked state that I could no longer feel my fingers. They were numb, freezing cold, and trembling as if they were about to snap. Every word that appeared on the page made the faint red glow flicker, then die out again like the final breath of a flame about to be extinguished. But it was the only thing keeping the darkness from swallowing me whole. The room had transformed into something no longer resembling any place in the world I once knew. The walls were no longer solid. They stretched and tightened like sheets of living flesh, breathing with whatever was behind them. The massive shadow crawling toward me no longer held any recognizable shape. It pulsed and expanded with every tremor, like a creature regaining its true form after a long, monstrous sleep. Thin strands of darkness unraveled from its body, stretching out like groping arms, searching for something to cling to. Every time one of those strands touched the floor, the surface sank in as if corroded. I could hear cracking noises everywhere, sharp and continuous. The thin creature hadn't given up either. It scuttled along the ground using both its hands and feet, moving with the speed of a giant spider. Its mouth hung open, revealing rows of needle-like teeth buried deep in its gums. A strained hissing sound escaped its throat, like the cry of an animal being strangled, but still trying to scream. Each time it made that sound, the temperature in the room dropped another degree, making me shiver uncontrollably. I kept writing like a desperate man. The page trembled in my hand, but the pen glided across it unnaturally smoothly, as though guided by another hand beneath the paper. The sentences I wrote described exactly what I was seeing, and wherever I wrote, the darkness seemed to retreat, even if only for the smallest distance. But the longer I wrote, the more I realized the words were changing me. It felt like something from the diary was flowing through the pen, slipping into my hand, crawling up my arm, and seeping inside my body. A small part of me trembled at the thought that by the time I finished writing, I might not be myself anymore. The pounding on the walls suddenly stopped. All the hands sticking out of the surface vanished at once, pulled sharply back into whatever realm they came from. The sudden silence was far more terrifying than the noise. I paused for a single second, just one to look around, and the ground beneath me cracked open. From the fissure, a blast of icy air surged upward, like the breath of something rising from the bottom of a pit. A single hand emerged, bigger than any hand I had seen before. Its fingers were long, bony, and coated with streaks of black ash. When it pressed against the floor, the surface shook as though carrying the weight of something impossibly colossal. I staggered back, nearly dropping the pen. At that exact moment, a new line appeared on the page, one I did not write. The handwriting was crooked, jagged, like it had been clawed into the paper from deep underground. It said that this world was not the only place I was standing, that I had already stepped 1 foot into the realm of the diary, where reality and darkness merged into one, that every trapped soul here contributed to a single form, a being they all called the Keeper. Under my feet, the crack widened. A single eye opened in the darkness. It stared at me like a black flame. No whites, no eyelids, just a slow, swirling void radiating a force that made my heart clench painfully. I wanted to run. I wanted to throw the diary away. I wanted to scream until my throat ripped open, but my hand wouldn't stop writing. When I tried to let go of the pen, the diary slammed itself against my palm, forcing the tip of the pen back onto the page as if delivering a command I could not disobey. The massive shadow in the corner crawled closer. This time it wasn't dragging itself. It stood up. Its full height reached the ceiling, causing cracks to spread instantly across the plaster, as if its body did not belong in this dimension. The thin creature crept to my right, circling, searching for a moment to attack. The room glowed faintly with the red light from the diary, but only barely, and I knew that glow was fragile, like the last lantern carried by the final survivor walking through an endless tunnel. Then the whispering surged again. Ethan, Ethan. Every time they said my name, my heart slammed against my ribs, threatening to burst. I wrote another sentence, and beneath it, a new line appeared in alien handwriting that wasn't mine. It said my soul was thinning, and if I kept writing, I would become part of the diary. But if I stopped writing, I would die in the hands of the things closing in on me. A choice without a choice. I swallowed hard, forced a breath into my burning lungs, and kept writing, knowing each stroke of the pen was carving another piece of my life away. I kept writing in a state of panic so intense that my breaths were no longer steady but broken, ragged gasps like someone drowning and clawing for air. The faint red glow of the diary flickered weakly, pulsing like the dying heartbeat of a creature on the verge of death. Yet I knew that faint glow was the only thing keeping the darkness from swallowing me whole. The room was no longer a room. It had become something alive. The walls pulsed and stretched, expanding and collapsing like layers of flesh breathing in and out, as though a monstrous presence hid behind them, using the house itself as lungs. The massive shadow in the corner had changed shape again. It was no longer human, no longer even a shadow. It had become a mass of shifting darkness, a formless entity covered in countless eyes, slowly opening one by one along its grotesque surface. Those eyes had no whites, only swirling black vortexes spinning in opposite directions like invisible storms. Every time one opened, time itself seemed to stretch around me, each second stretching into a minute, suffocating me in slow motion. The thin, broken creature crawled in a circle around me like a predator waiting for its chance. It moved flat against the ground, its long, twig-like arms brushing the floor, and wherever it touched, the wood rotted away instantly. Each movement left fresh indentations, holes, and warped patches in the boards. Its hollow eyes were trembling now, vibrating with some grotesque anticipation, and it sniffed the air as if feeding on the fear spilling out of my skin. Then the whispers changed. They were no longer faint, no longer distant. The voices grew sharper, layered, dozens of people speaking in unison, yet speaking in a language I could not understand. The sounds twisted and stretched, rising from beneath the floorboards and falling from the ceiling at the same time. And then suddenly, all of them stopped. Silence crushed the room. A single voice replaced them. Clear, cold, sharp as a blade. "Ethan." It came from directly behind me. I turned my head on instinct, only for a moment. A single moment, but that moment was too long. The thin creature lunged forward, faster than anything I had ever seen. It sprang like a starving beast, its snapped neck jerking wildly, its mouth yawning open far beyond what a human jaw should allow. Inside was not a throat, not teeth, not flesh. Only a black void, a doorway into somewhere I never wanted to see. I screamed, stumbled backward, and thrust the diary forward like a shield. The diary exploded with red light so bright it stung my eyes. A blast of invisible force shot out from the page, freezing the creature in midair. It didn't fall. It slid backward unnaturally, as if some invisible hand grabbed it by the spine and yanked it away. Its scream scraped through the room like metal teeth carving into glass. But before I could even breathe, an eye opened on the wall, not on the creature, on the wall itself. A A huge, swirling black eye stared at me, rotating slowly like a tunnel of darkness. Then another eye opened, and another, and two more, and then dozens. They opened across every surface, walls, ceiling, floor, all staring at me, all watching, surrounding me like an animal placed under a spotlight. My stomach twisted violently. My hands shook so hard the pen slipped between my fingers. But I had to write. I had to keep going. I forced myself to drag the pen back to the page. The moment the pen tip scratched into the paper, all of the eyes snapped shut at once. They did not disappear. They opened again. Behind me, a cold wave froze my spine in place. I felt a breath colder than any wind in the room so far blow across the back of my neck. I knew the keeper was drawing closer. I felt him standing behind me, towering, looming, studying me with hunger. A new line carved itself onto the page, not written by me. It said I was not only writing my fear, I was writing the keeper's true form, and every line I wrote was calling him closer. I wanted to drop the pen. I wanted to run. I wanted to tear the diary apart and scream for help until my throat tore open. But the diary vibrated violently, slamming my hand down like a shackle. The only choice I had left was to continue writing and hope that when the keeper finally appeared in full, I would still be alive to face him. I tried to steady my breathing as my hand remained pinned to the page, forced to write as though I were signing the final will of my own life. The air around me thickened, no longer feeling like air, but like cold mud slowly swallowing me whole. The room grew darker, so dark I could no longer tell where the shadows ended and where the creatures began. The heavy breathing behind me continued, slow and ancient, like something primordial had awakened after centuries of sleeping beneath the earth. I glanced down at the diary and saw the words trembling on the page as though the diary itself was afraid. A new line carved itself beneath my writing. It said that the keeper never fully appears unless the writer's soul is dragged near the threshold of death. That I was moving closer and closer to that edge. Before I could even grasp what that meant, the entire room shook violently, as if someone had ripped the house downward from the sky. Dust rained down from the ceiling. A long, cracking sound tore across the room like the spine of a giant snapping in half. From that crack, a dark, liquid shadow poured out, flowing down the wall like ink spilled over a corpse. It formed distorted human faces pressed outward, all screaming in total silence. I instinctively tried to step back, but my foot wouldn't move. When I looked down, my heart nearly burst. Black, withered hands, bony, root-like, dead, had wrapped themselves around my ankle from beneath the floorboards. They squeezed tighter, cutting into my skin until my leg went numb. I tried to yank free, but their grip only grew stronger, pulling sharply, tearing at the muscles in my leg. Just then, the thin creature reappeared to my left. It stood upright now, its height nearly touching the ceiling. Its body jittered, twitching violently as if manipulated by invisible strings, its jaw unhinged, stretching impossibly wide, revealing nothing inside. No teeth, no tongue, only a swirling pit of darkness. It pressed its long, bony fingers against the wall, and the wall dissolved under its touch like flesh drenched in acid. I kept writing, terrified out of my mind, as the massive shadow in the corner straightened to its full height, now even taller than the thin creature. Every single eye on its body opened, staring directly at me from every angle, as if checking whether I was close enough to death. Then one of the eyes shifted, slowly, deliberately. It focused on my wrist, the one holding the pen. Instantly, my hand went numb, completely paralyzed. Pain crackled up my wrist like thin fractures spreading through bone. It was as if the diary was ready to break my arm just to make sure I kept writing. The moment I thought I could take no more, the diary flared with a burst of red light so bright it burned my eyes. Every creature in the room froze. I used that split second to rip my foot free from the hands below, but only one leg came loose. The other was yanked so hard I fell to the floor. My head slammed into the edge of the table with a loud crack. My vision blurred, and for a moment everything spun. When the blur faded, something was inches from my face. No skin, no nose, no eyes, only a long, torn mouth stretching from one ear to the other. Inside its mouth, dozens of tiny shadows writhed like creatures fighting to escape. I screamed and hurled the diary at its face, but the diary passed through it like passing through smoke, and the entire room trembled, as if the earth itself was enraged. The diary shot across the room, stopping in mid-air before dropping open and glowing an angry red. I scrambled toward it because I knew without it, the darkness would rip me apart limb by limb. The moment my fingers touched the cover, a violent force yanked at my soul as if trying to tear me out of my own body. A new line raced across the page. It said that if I did not finish the story before the night ended, I would not simply die here. I would become part of the Keeper, another eye on his body, another soul trapped forever in the pages. I clutched the diary like a lifeline. I had never felt death this close, and the night was still far from over. I clutched the diary tight against my chest, my breaths sharp and ragged like someone sprinting through an endless night with no escape. The sounds in the room changed around me. They were no longer whispers or dragging footsteps. They blended together into one deep, thunderous noise like a massive heartbeat echoing beneath the floor. Each thump made the ground tremble, dust drift from the ceiling, and a coldness sharper than ice slash across my skin. I knew the Keeper was close. Closer than ever. The entire room continued to distort. The walls curved inward, as if the space itself were being bent, reshaped into the inside of a giant container slowly closing around me. Even the colors shifted. The gray darkness of the room faded into a deep red black, making me feel as if I were standing inside the beating heart of some colossal beast, each pulse threatening to crush me alive. The thin creature stepped toward me again, but this time it didn't charge like a starving animal. It walked slowly, deliberately, every movement savoring the terror, choking the life from my body, its torso bent unnaturally, its long arms dragging across the floorboards without making a sound, leaving behind patches of rotting wood that crumbled into dust. A freezing chill poured from its body, stabbing into my skin like thousands of tiny needles. But then it stopped. Not because of me, not because of the diary. It stopped because the massive shadow behind me had begun to move. I turned around, and every muscle in my body nearly collapsed under its own weight. The shadow had transformed yet again. It now towered so tall that it had to bend its upper body to fit inside the room, its size distorting the air around it, like the world wasn't designed to contain it. The countless eyes covering its body opened wider, swirling like black holes, sucking in every trace of light. Thin cracks spread from its presence along the walls and ceiling, glowing faintly red like exposed veins of the world's darkest nightmare. And then something even worse happened. A giant hand pushed out from its darkness, each finger long, sharp and curved like hooked blades. They dug into the floor with a heavy metallic thud, scraping through the wood as though it were wet clay. The air vibrated like a funeral drumbeat. On the diary's page, a new line engraved itself in jagged lettering. It said, the Keeper was trying to fully cross over, that the barrier between his world and mine was thinning too quickly, that once he stepped through, nothing could stop him. I swallowed hard, my heartbeat slamming against my ribs like it wanted to escape. I lifted the pen, but my hand shook so violently the letters stretched and warped across the page, as if someone else were trying to write through me. The room dimmed until only the red glow from the diary illuminated my face. The thin creature didn't move closer now. It stood still, tilting its broken head as though waiting for something. I didn't understand why until I heard it. Something was crawling beneath the floor. Not hands, not footsteps, but the sound of hundreds of fingernails scraping the underside of the wooden boards. They clawed with such force the floor cracked open in splinters, dust shooting up as the boards began to bulge beneath me, as if something huge and furious were trying to break through. My instinct screamed. I bent over the diary and wrote as fast as I could. The pen carved into the page. The red glow surged upward. The bulging floor froze instantly the moment I finished the final word of the sentence, only for a few seconds. Then the floor bulged again, harder than before. Angry, a heavy thud struck right behind me. I turned, and my heart dropped into nothing. The massive shadow was no longer in the corner. It was leaning down toward me, every one of its swirling black eyes focused on me at once, piercing, judging, starving. I understood then. I was no longer writing to survive. I was writing to delay my death, and that delay was running out. I stood frozen, my whole body trembling like a candle about to die in an invisible storm. The massive shadow leaned down so close that even though it had no clear face, its breath or whatever passed for one felt like ice sinking into my spine. Each of its countless eyes rotated slowly, all of them locking onto me at the same time, like hundreds of barrels aimed straight at my heart. I no longer knew what I was facing. A creature, a force, a nightmare, or death itself wearing the shape of 1,000 unblinking eyes. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Both of them were pinned by an invisible weight pressing down on the floor. I felt like prey tied to a sacrificial altar. The thin creature beside me began to emit a high-pitched hiss, each note sharp enough to raise goosebumps across my skin. It crawled toward me slowly, dragging the stench of decay with it, the smell of corpses left in a locked basement for months. Then the diary in my hand began to burn so hot I clenched my teeth to endure it. The page glowed brighter, and the lines I had written flickered in and out as if the diary itself was breathing. A new page flipped open on its own, though the air in the room was perfectly still. The sentence etched there made my heart slam against my ribs. It said the keeper had crossed halfway through the doorway, that I was the only thing holding the door from opening completely, that if I stopped, this world would become part of his. My throat tightened. I didn't know how to keep writing when the darkness was devouring every inch of space around me. The entire room shook violently like an earthquake ripping through it. Furniture toppled over, crashing into walls and shattering. A chair flew into the corner and crushed into a warped shape as if squeezed by invisible hands. I bit down on my lip, lifted the pen, and wrote. My hand shook so violently the letters twisted across the page, but I kept going. The moment the pen scratched the paper, a razor-sharp screech tore through the room. The thin creature lunged at me, but was blasted back by a pulse of red light bursting out of the diary. It was thrown across the room, its limbs bending in unnatural angles like every bone was being snapped one by one. But the massive shadow did not move. It simply stood there, watching, staring through me, as if reading my thoughts word for word. I kept writing, but every word I put down seemed to bend the room even more, as if describing the nightmare made it stronger, more real. The keeper's eyes, every single one, opened wider. Saw, larger, darker, swirling faster. One eye opened right in front of my face, so close I could see the deep, spiraling void inside it, pulling everything inward. I almost dropped the pen. Then I heard a whisper right beside my ear. Not one voice, not two, hundreds, all speaking in unison. Ethan, Ethan, Ethan. It wasn't calling my name. It was calling my soul. I screamed and scribbled frantically, no longer caring if the words were legible. My wrist felt like it was being twisted backward, each bone threatening to crack. But I kept writing. I had to. The diary exploded with red light again, bright enough to paint the entire room like it was burning. And then the floor split open beneath me. A gigantic hand emerged. Not skin, not bone. A hand made entirely of living darkness, its shape shifting like liquid shadows. It clamped around my ankle. I fell to the ground, the diary nearly flying out of my grasp. I screamed, grabbing it desperately with my free hand. The shadow hand tightened, and a surge of pain shot up my leg as if every nerve was being ripped apart. A new line burned itself across the page. It said the keeper had touched me, and once he touched a soul, that soul could never escape. I cried out and forced another sentence onto the page. The red light burst again, this time so violently that the shadow hand recoiled, sliding back into the darkness beneath the floor and leaving behind a bottomless black hole. I gasped, cold sweat running down my back, but I knew the truth. The keeper wasn't stopping. He was testing my strength, and I was getting weaker. I stood trembling, still gripping the diary, as if letting go for even a second would mean the darkness would tear me apart. The room was no longer my room. Reality was melting. The ceiling stretched like fabric pulled too tight. The corners of the walls curved inward, as if softening into liquid. All natural order was gone. Everything twisted and warped to the rhythm of the keeper's breath, and I could feel him breathing slow, deep, each inhale dragging the air out of my lungs. The thin creature crawled up the wall like a gigantic spider, its long, spindly arms hooked into the cracks, ripping chunks of plaster off as it climbed. Its body twitched violently whenever a piece of the wall fell, as though the darkness itself was feeding it. Its hollow eyes remained locked on me, unblinking. I could feel that if I stopped writing for even a heartbeat, it would leap down and swallow me whole into that endless black void inside its mouth. The keeper was different. He didn't need to attack. He only needed to watch, to wait, to let my soul rot under its own fear. Each of his countless eyes rotated slowly, like ancient gears turning in a machine buried for 1,000 years. They dug into me, deeper and deeper, pulling at my thoughts, my memories, my sanity. I could feel pieces of my mind drifting away as if being peeled off by invisible hands. I dropped to my knees, gripping the diary to keep myself anchored in reality. The page flipped again. A new line etched itself in jagged strokes. It said my soul had begun to separate from my body, that the keeper already held a part of me, that I had only one choice left if I wanted to survive. But it didn't say what that choice was. The message simply ended, like a sentence cut short by something watching me from behind the page. I screamed in frustration, and I wrote. I wrote like someone clinging to the last thread of life. The moment I finished the sentence, a loud crack erupted on my right. The wall split wide open. Hundreds of black hands poured out, long, withered, skeletal hands. This time they weren't reaching for me. They all reached toward the keeper, not to attack him, but to welcome him, to open a path for him. Cold dread flooded my body. I understood then. He was about to step fully into this world. The floor shook violently, forcing me to catch myself with my free hand. Spiderweb cracks spread across the boards, glowing red like the veins of a burning world beneath my feet. A sorrowful, wailing sound filled the room like thousands of souls being dragged down into a bottomless pit. Then every one of the keeper's eyes locked onto a single point. My hand and the pen in it. My wrist tightened instantly, as if invisible ropes wrapped around bone, twisting each joint. Pain exploded up my arm until I almost fainted. The diary glowed brighter. The words I had written began rising off the page like smoke, spiraling around me in a red vortex. Each glowing letter felt like a tiny spark resisting the ocean of darkness closing in. The thin creature shrieked, enraged, its voice slicing through the room like shattered glass. It launched itself from the ceiling, but slammed into an invisible barrier and fell back, its limbs bending grotesquely. The keeper stepped forward, just one step, but the ground cracked open like a crushed eggshell. I knew then I was going to die. Not in minutes, in seconds. I tried to lift my pen despite the agony shredding my wrist. I had to write. I had to finish the next part. I had to survive. But just as the pen touched the page, a whisper breathed directly beside my ear. Cold, steady, and unmistakably dead. It told me my choice had already begun, and only I could write the rest of it. I stood frozen, still gripping the pen, my heart thundering as if ready to explode out of my chest. The voice that had whispered into my ear moments earlier still burned in my mind, like a hot brand pressed deep into my skull. I didn't know who it belonged to or what it was, but it wasn't like the twisted whispers I had heard before. It was clearer, closer, as if death itself were speaking directly into my ear. I didn't dare turn around. I knew if I did, I would see something I would never be able to forget, something that might tear away whatever sanity I had left. The room continued to distort. The wall to my right bulged outward, as if something enormous was pressing from behind it. A loud, fleshy pop echoed through the room as a human face pushed through the surface of the wall, eyes bulging, mouth stretched in a silent scream. Then another face, and another. Dozens of human faces pressed out of the wall, their features twisted in anguish, their silent cries vibrating through the air like trapped souls, desperately begging for release. I forced myself to keep writing, each stroke of the pen beating against the collapsing reality beneath my feet. My hands shook uncontrollably, but the diary tightened around my fingers like it was binding my hand to the paper. The words I had written glowed, this time not red, but white, cold white, the kind of sterile, unforgiving light found in an operating room, exposing every horrifying detail. Instantly, the keeper stopped moving. His entire towering form froze for a moment. The countless eyes across his body slowed their swirling rotations, as if recognizing something dangerous. The thin creature froze as well. It stared at me, not with its empty eyes, but with something deeper behind them, something old, something aware. I looked down at the page, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw a line written in my own handwriting, not etched, not forced, but written. It said my only way to survive was to change roles, that if I wanted to live, I wasn't just the writer of this story. I had to become the one controlling it. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. What did that even mean? Rewrite reality, force the nightmare to obey me, change the keeper through my words. I didn't have time to think. The floor cracked wide open again. From beneath it, dozens of human-like figures crawled up, not monsters, not creatures, people, but twisted, bodies broken and bent backward, limbs twisted into impossible angles, crawling on hands and feet like beasts. Their empty eyes stared at me, and their mouths muttered words I couldn't understand. One of them crawled directly toward me, its arms sliding across the floor like a strip of wet leather. I looked into its face, and I almost screamed, because the face was mine, but pale, cold, dead, its eye sockets hollowed out like pits of darkness. I wrote frantically, tears and sweat blurring my vision. The room roared with the sounds of wood cracking, flesh dragging, bones snapping, and inhuman voices wailing. The chaos wrapped around me like a storm determined to tear me apart. I wrote one more sentence, just one, and the moment it was finished, my entire body jerked violently as if a hook had been embedded in my spine and yanked backward. The crawling figures froze. The screaming faces on the wall twisted violently. The thin creature stepped back. The keeper tilted his head, watching me with silent curiosity. Everything stared at me, as if I had just touched a forbidden thread in their world. A new line appeared on the page, shivering as if written by trembling hands. It said that whatever I wrote now would not merely describe, it would decide. The form of the darkness, the actions of the creatures, and the fate of the keeper. My hand tightened around the pen, fingers stiff with fear. I was no longer only running from death. I was writing my destiny, and the keeper was waiting to see what I would write next. I stood in the center of the collapsing, twisted room, my fingers wrapped so tightly around the pen that my nails dug into my palm. I understood more clearly than ever that from this moment on, every word I wrote wouldn't just describe reality, it would create it. It would shape it. It could save me or kill me instantly. There was no border anymore between the story and the real world. Each sentence was a tug of war between me and the keeper, and he was watching every single movement. A wave of cold air swept across the back of my neck. He was behind me, not far, not looming, but standing right there, so close that if I paused even for one breath, his hand would pass through my body. I lowered my gaze to the page. My hand trembled, but I forced myself to write a single sentence. I wrote that the light from the diary grew stronger. Instantly, the white light exploded outward like a shockwave. The crawling figures on the floor were thrown backward, sliding across the boards like lifeless bodies being dragged by ropes. The faces bulging from the walls were sucked inward and vanished as if ripped out by invisible hooks. The keeper roared, not like an animal, but like metal carved against stone, like a chorus of tortured souls screaming in unison. His massive form convulsed, and the swirling eyes across his body tightened as though resisting something that was tearing him apart. I wrote another sentence. I wrote that the thin creature could not come near me. Immediately, its body jerked violently and slammed into the wall, limbs bending at grotesque angles. It screeched in agony, the sound vibrating through the room like burning glass. No matter how it struggled, it couldn't take one step toward me. I felt power in every word, but it terrified me just as much as the keeper did, because if I wrote the wrong thing, I could end myself, but I didn't have time to be careful. The keeper took another step forward, just one step, but the entire room tilted downward, as if the world were about to collapse. I was thrown sideways, slamming into the wall. The diary slipped from my hand for a split second, but I grabbed it before it fell. I knew I had to write. Right now, if I didn't, he would tear me apart. I wrote that he stopped. The moment the pen touched the page, the world cracked like thunder. The keeper stopped, completely frozen, as though his entire body had turned to hardened shadow, but only for 1 second. Then the eyes across his body opened wider. They spun faster. Their colors shifted from black to red, then to a sickening white. The white of rotting corpses. A shiver tore through me. I had stopped him, but I had also enraged him. A violent crack split the room in half. The floor opened into a deep abyss. I slid toward it uncontrollably. Black skeletal hands shot up from the chasm, grabbing my legs, clawing, pulling, dragging me toward the darkness like they had been waiting for me. I fought to keep writing. My arm was jerked violently, but I clung to the pen with both hands and forced out the next sentence. I wrote that the hands let go, and they did. All of them, instantly, brutally, but I kept sliding downward. There were no hands pulling anymore. The floor itself was collapsing. I had seconds before I fell into that bottomless pit. I took a breath so deep it hurt, lifted the pen, and wrote another sentence with the last of my strength. And then the light in the room changed. Not red, not white, but golden, faint, soft, like the last ray of sunset. Everything stopped. The wind froze, the screams froze, the creatures froze. Even the keeper stopped moving. A deep silence filled the entire room. The diary glowed, and a new line etched itself onto the page. I had opened the second door. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew one thing for certain. I had just touched a power even the keeper did not want me to discover. The pale golden light filled the room like a thin veil of fog. It wasn't warm, and it wasn't strong enough to make me feel safe, but at least it kept the darkness from crawling any closer. Everything stood motionless, frozen in a moment, ripped out of time. The black skeletal hands still reached up from the gaping hole in the floor, but hung suspended in midair, as if someone had paused the world. The thin creature remained pinned against the wall, mouth stretched open in a silent scream, and the keeper stood in the center of the room, towering and still, his swirling eyes turning so slowly it looked like even he was bound by this new force. I gulped down breaths, my chest aching, my mind reeled, as though someone had dragged me underwater and yanked me back up too quickly. I looked down at the diary in my hands. The page glowed brightly. The line I had just read etched so sharply it felt carved into my bones. I had opened the second door. The sentence felt less like an explanation and more like a warning. I understood what the first door was. It was the moment I touched the diary, the moment I stepped into its world, the moment I became prey. But the second door, was this it? The realization that my words didn't just describe reality, they could control it. And if that was the second door, What in God's name was the third? Why had everything frozen the moment I crossed it? A dull ache spread down my temple and into my neck. I touched my cheek and jerked back. My skin felt icy, completely numb. Under the faint golden light, I saw that my skin had grown pale, almost translucent. Thin veins glowed underneath like faint streams of ink. For the first time, I realized I might not fully belong to this side anymore. The diary vibrated softly, turning a page on its own. A new line began forming, painfully slow, each letter growing like roots forcing their way up from beneath the paper. It said that the second door was the middle realm, a place not belonging to the living, nor belonging entirely to the keeper. A place where those who touched the diary but weren't yet consumed could exist temporarily. A place where a soul could write reality before it was taken. My breath hitched. I understood now. I was standing in a crossroads, a space not completely my room, not completely the keeper's domain, a space where rules could bend if I wrote them right. The pen still rested in my hand. It felt heavier than before, not like a writing tool, but like a key, a weapon, or a shackle, depending on how I used it. I took a deep breath, forcing my trembling mind to steady. I decided to test it. I wrote a single short sentence. I wrote that none of the trapped souls in this room could touch me. Immediately, the room trembled. The faces in the walls, once stretching toward me, froze at a distance as if held back by an invisible barrier. The crawling figures on the floor halted several feet away, their distorted faces still turned toward me like starving predators staring at their last meal. The black hands beneath the hole stretched upward, but could not reach me, even though they were only inches away. My pulse quickened, not from fear this time, but from a flicker of hope. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just prey. I could fight back, even if only a little. But the instant that hope surfaced, another sound broke the silence. Not a growl, not a scream, not a whisper. A laugh, soft, metallic, like pieces of iron tapping together. It echoed from somewhere above me, spreading across the room. I looked up. Hanging from the ceiling, caught between the cracks, was a shadowy figure. Not the keeper, not the thin creature. A person, tall, thin, draped in dark clothing, hair hanging over most of their face, their body suspended in midair by an invisible force, feet not touching the floor. Slowly, the figure lifted its head, a faint smile. Thin, emotionless, and the eyes, not swirling black voids, not hollow pits, but human, alive. A new line etched itself onto the page. It said the person hanging from the ceiling wasn't a monster. He was the writer before me. The one who opened the second door but never reached the third. He stared at me as if evaluating me. Then he opened his mouth. No sound came out, yet his words echoed directly inside my head. He told me the power I was using was not free, that every sentence I wrote to bend reality stole a fragment of my soul, that the more I wrote, the more I would become like him, a body suspended in the middle realm, neither alive nor dead, belonging nowhere. My hands grew colder. I looked at the sentences I had written, the ones that forced the keeper to stop, that pushed away the thin creature, that kept the shadows from grabbing me. They still floated around me, glowing faintly like small sparks. For a brief moment, I thought I saw tiny faces trapped inside each of those glowing words, like souls locked into the sentences. The voice of the dangling writer rang in my head again. He said if I wanted to survive, I had to use the second door wisely. I couldn't write whatever I wanted without paying a price. Every decision I imposed on this reality would make the keeper more curious, more interested, more eager to consume me, because he didn't just crave the souls of the weak, he craved the souls of those who could rewrite his rules. I looked back at the keeper. He was still frozen, but the eyes across his massive body were turning slowly. Some of them no longer watched me with cold hunger, but with anticipation, waiting to see what I would write next. I realized I had become something different in this nightmare, no longer just a victim, but a piece on the board he wanted to play with. I lowered my pen to the page. The tip trembled as it touched the paper. The next sentence I wrote could lead me to the third door, or it could deliver me into the keeper's hands. I stood silent for a long moment, not because I wanted to, but because my entire body felt locked in place. It was as if an invisible hand pressed down on my shoulder, forcing me to stand still and listen to whatever was unfolding around me. The air in the room grew heavier, colder, thick like fog from the land of the dead, filling my lungs. Everything remained frozen under the pale golden light, but I knew this stillness wasn't safety. It felt like the brief calm before the final storm tore the world apart. The glowing sentences floating around me slowly dimmed, fading like dying embers caught in a cold wind. I watched them dissolve into the air, each stroke disintegrating into dust. When the final line disappeared, something new appeared on the page. This time the sentence didn't shine. It seeped into the paper like a spreading blood stain. It said I was about to open the third door. My heart slammed inside my chest. I hadn't written that sentence. None of the letters were mine, but it was there, the third door. Every letter made my skin crawl. I looked up at the man hanging from the ceiling. He still stared at me, but now his eyes weren't cold or empty. I saw something else, fear, a true, raw fear I had never seen in any creature or spirit in this room. He had no voice, yet I could feel his warning through the faintest movement of his lips. Do not open it. I stepped back. The floor cracked immediately, forcing me to freeze. Golden fissures shot across the room like lightning, glowing the same pale yellow that had protected me moments ago. But now it felt like those cracks wanted to cut the world apart. The diary grew warm in my hands. Not warm like fire, warm like blood flowing faster and faster through a pulse. Like the diary itself was beating with my own heart. Then the keeper moved, just once, a tiny motion, but it was the first time he had budged since the golden light appeared. One of the many eyes on his body opened wider, much wider. Its color was a sickly white, cloudy like a corpse's eye. It didn't swirl, it didn't stay still. It moved like a door slowly opening. I froze. That eye was the third door, not on the page, not in my world, but on the keeper's body. My hand stiffened. The pen felt magnetized, pulled by an invisible force toward the page. I fought it, but the pull grew stronger, as if reality itself wanted me to write what came next. A sentence began forming on the paper, even though I hadn't touched it. Letters crawled up from beneath the surface like worms burrowing out of damp soil. I was about to write the sentence that opened the third door. No, not me. The diary. The diary wanted to open it. The diary wanted me to open it. I screamed and ripped my hand away. The pen fell to the floor. Its tiny clatter echoed through the room like a shattered oath. Instantly, the room changed. The golden light vanished. Darkness rushed back in, thick and suffocating. Time snapped back into motion. The hands beneath the floor lunged upward again. The faces in the walls resumed their silent shrieks. The thin creature burst forward like a starving beast. The keeper opened all his eyes. Everyone, hundreds, a whole sky of bottomless pits staring straight at me. I dove for the pen, but before I touched it, another voice filled my mind. Not the voice of the man on the ceiling, not the keeper, not the whispering chorus of dead souls. It was my own voice, but older, deeper, like me from the future or me from the grave. It told me that if I opened the third door without knowing what lay behind it, I would be torn apart piece by piece. But if I didn't open it, the keeper would take me right here. Both choices led to death, but only one death had a chance of survival. I reached for the diary. The man on the ceiling shook his head in agony. The keeper stepped forward, shaking the entire room like the world was cracking. I lifted the pen. The pages opened on their own, and I wrote. The moment the pen's tip touched the paper, the entire room shook as if awakened from a 1,000-year slumber. From deep within the diary, a rumbling sound rose, nothing like a growl or a scream, but like hundreds of buried voices pushing upward at once. The pen moved with such force that pain shot up my wrist, as though I was no longer the one controlling it, but merely a conduit for something else writing my fate. As soon as the sentence appeared, the world reacted. The walls expanded outward, not cracking, but opening like living flesh, tearing apart. Thick darkness oozed from within, dripping down like viscous tar. The floor curved as if made of stretched skin. The entire room twisted and writhed, reshaping itself into a new reality. On the ceiling, the hanging man began convulsing. His entire body jolted like he was being electrocuted, mouth open in a silent scream. His eyes darted wildly, as if he was witnessing something he had once fled from, something he never wanted to see again. I understood then that he knew what was coming, and he was terrified. The keeper lowered his head to look at me. He didn't rush forward. He didn't attack. He didn't make a sound. He only watched with hundreds of eyes open wide, each one swirling like a tiny universe drilling into my soul. And then the realization hit me like a blade. He wasn't stopping me because I was stronger. He wasn't afraid of my writing He wanted me to open the third door. He wanted it to be opened by my hand. I had been dragged into the center of a ritual I never understood. The diary wasn't my weapon. It was the key he needed, a key only a living host could use. I wanted to stop. I wanted to throw the pen away, but the pen clung to my hand as if welded to my skin. I pulled, but my fingers wouldn't obey. The veins in my arms darkened and bulged, like my blood was changing color. Pain surged from my wrist up to my shoulder, then into my chest. I gasped for air, feeling like I was drowning in ice. I tried writing a sentence to stop everything. I wrote that all of it had to stop, that the keeper could not come closer, that the room had to return to normal, but no words appeared. The page remained blank. No reaction, no glow. Like all the power I had ever used had been drained away. I realized the truth. The third door was taking control. I wasn't writing it open. It was using me to open itself. The room temperature plummeted. My breath turned to frost. My whole body trembled uncontrollably. The black hands beneath the floor no longer reached for me. They retreated, bowing as if kneeling before something about to arrive. The wall across from me began to split open, not breaking, opening like a door made of flesh and shadow peeling apart. A freezing wind blew out from the gap, a wind that carried the smell of decay, of rotting flesh, of spirits torn into pieces. The keeper stepped aside, not in fear, but in deference. My heart throbbed painfully. I understood the horrifying truth. The keeper wasn't the door. He was only the keeper of it. And what lay behind the wall was the true entity, the one even monsters bowed to. Invisible footsteps echoed from within the darkness. Each step made the floor groan like a spine snapping under pressure. I tried to step back, but my legs were pinned to the ground. My spine froze as a colossal shape approached. I couldn't see its form, not its face, not its limbs. Just a mass of darkness so dense that even the light was sucked into it. The third door was opening, and I was the one opening it. There was no turning back. All the eyes on the keeper's body turned toward me at once, as if waiting to see whether I would be devoured instantly, or whether I would have enough time to write a final sentence to save myself. I raised the pen. My hand was no longer mine. The pages glowed. A new sentence began forming on its own. And then I wrote. The sentence I wrote wasn't like any sentence before it. It didn't appear in light, and it didn't carve itself into the paper. It rose out of the page like something alive, each letter swelling, twitching, then tearing itself free like sinew being pulled apart. When the sentence was complete, the diary produced a sound like a heartbeat. One beat, two beats, then faster, harder, like the heart of something enormous, waking after thousands of years, buried in darkness. The room was no longer a room. It was breathing, slow breaths, deep breaths, as though the house itself had become a living creature. Cracks in the walls widened into jagged mouths, filled with rows of black shadow teeth. The floor swelled upward and sank downward with the rhythm of something massive breathing beneath it. The soft golden glow I once depended on was swallowed entirely by the red-black darkness returning in waves. The only light left came from the pen's tip and the open page in front of me. The colossal shape behind the third door moved another step. No legs, no defined form, just a mass of darkness so dense that sound died the moment it touched it. Its presence warped the air, not physically but mentally, crushing my thoughts, squeezing my sanity until it felt like my skull might crack. The keeper lowered himself like a servant, bowing before a master. The many eyes across his body spun faster, waiting, anticipating. The thin creature pressed its face to the floor like a terrified animal. Even the black hands beneath the floor withdrew fully. Bowing, everything submitted to what was emerging. In that moment, I understood all the monsters I had seen were only the surface. This was the root, the true owner of the diary, the thing that created the keeper, the thing that wrote the laws of the in-between realm, and I had brought it out. A whisper rose not into my ears, but directly into my bones. It wasn't one voice, not a demon's voice, not a human's voice, but many voices speaking as one, an entire crowd murmuring inside my head. It said the door was open. It said I had been chosen to guide it. It said my fate was sealed the moment I touched the diary, not by accident, by design. My body trembled violently. I wanted to drop the pen. I wanted to tear the diary apart. I wanted to scream, but my limbs no longer obeyed me. Veins along my arm darkened and bulged, spreading to my chest, up my neck. My vision wavered like I was looking through deep water. The diary split open wider, its pages lifting on their own and spinning into the air like torn feathers. They circled me in a massive spiral, and every sentence ripped from those pages glowed red and white, twisting into strands that looked like living nerves. They wrapped around me, tightening, draining the breath from my lungs. I tried to write a sentence to stop this, a single line to break the ritual, but my hand refused to move. The pen moved itself. It wrote about me. It wrote that I must step into the darkness behind the third door. It wrote that I no longer belonged to this world. I tried to shout, to hold on to myself, to cling to the last piece of consciousness that was mine. I forced myself to write against it. I wrote that I had the right to decide my own fate. The pen stopped. The room stopped. Even the darkness froze. Then the deep breath from the third door rumbled outward, a sound like the earth itself cracking open. A massive shadow hand emerged. No bones, no skin, just pure darkness shaped into a hand so huge it dwarfed the entire wall. It reached toward me, not to kill me, but to receive me, to pull me into the third door, into the place no human ever returns from. But I still had the pen. I still had my words. I still had one last chance. I inhaled sharply, gathering the last spark of strength left in my body, and I wrote. The pen in my hand glowed brighter than ever, cold bluish white light traveling down my wrist and into the darkened veins now pulsing across my skin as the final word of my sentence formed. The entire space shook violently, as if reality had been sliced open by an invisible blade. Light burst out, not the light of life, but the frantic, violent glow of something struggling against absolute darkness. The enormous shadow hand emerging from the third door froze midair, its fingers curled slightly, trembling as though torn between crushing me or grasping me. Within the thick darkness of the hand, I saw movement, not of a creature, not of many creatures, but of countless faces embedded in the shadows, each eye opening, turning toward me. Old faces, young faces, twisted faces, faces that no longer resembled anything human, all of them staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Not hatred, not hunger, something worse, evaluation. That was when I understood. The thing emerging from the third door was not a single entity. It was a collective, a mass, a fusion of every soul the diary had devoured. A single consciousness made from hundreds of minds crushed and rewritten, and I had touched its awareness. The room cracked further. Huge fractures split the floor into jagged chasms that screamed like tortured spirits. The black hands that once clawed upward now retreated. Trembling, the thin creature collapsed, curling into itself like it wished it could disappear completely. Even the keeper remained still, but I noticed something different. He wasn't bowing anymore. He was stepping back, slowly, deliberately. For the first time, the keeper retreated from another presence. But I could not retreat. I was being pulled forward, not by force, but by my own written words. I had written that I had the right to choose my fate. Now fate demanded I prove it. The air thickened, breathing became a battle. The flying pages swirling around me shrieked, spinning faster like a storm of razor-sharp paper. Every page flickered with red and white sentences, sparking like shorting wires. The giant shadow hand moved closer. Slowly, inevitably, I lifted the pen, desperate to write a sentence that could push it back, a line that could close the third door, a line that could keep me from being dragged into the darkness. But my hand jerked violently, seized by invisible chains. The pen trembled uncontrollably. The page flashed with blinding light, and then I wrote. Not what I intended, but what the diary forced me to write. I wrote that I saw it, that I recognized it, that I knew its name. The moment the sentence completed, a deep, universe-crushing breath echoed from beyond the door, like the cosmos inhaling. Darkness peeled back from the giant hand. A shape behind it began to form, not clear, not defined, but enough for me to feel its unbearable weight. A head, but instead of a face, a vast, swirling black vortex, wider than the doorway itself, consuming every trace of light within that swirling void. Hundreds of whispers rose together, forming a choir of souls devoured long ago. I tried to step back instinctively, but my legs refused to obey. A new sentence appeared on the page, not written by me, not by the diary, but by the thing behind the third door. It wrote that I had chosen the path of the marked. It wrote that if I knew its name, I would never escape it. It wrote that it had waited for me for a very long time. The shadow hand moved closer, so close I felt its icy breath against my skin. My consciousness began tearing at the edges, splitting one part, clinging to the world of the living. The other pulled toward the third door. The keeper watched, dozens of eyes swirling faster, as though he wanted to see which side I would fall to. I tightened my grip on the pen, my mind spinning, my body trembling, but my hand still capable of writing. I took a deep breath, and I continued to write. I felt every nerve in my head stretch tight like steel wires pulled to their breaking point. When the pen's first stroke touched the page, I was no longer the one deciding what the sentence would be. It felt as if I were writing with a will far larger, deeper, and darker than my own. Consciousness, ancient and monstrous, guiding my hand. The space around me warped violently. It was no longer just cracking or shaking. It was shrinking, folding, twisting in angles that didn't belong to the world of the living. The walls collapsed inward like air being sucked into a black hole. The floor buckled and curled, as if being eaten from below. The pages whirling around me spun faster, becoming a cyclone of past, present, and future merging together. The glowing sentences twisted into strands like invisible cords connecting straight into my chest. The colossal shadow hand reached further into the room, each finger bent with a sickening metallic crunch. Faces appeared within the darkness of its palm, not speaking, but screaming with their eyes, begging me not to come closer. But I had no choice. There was no turning back. The phrases on the page blazed like fire. A new sentence formed right before my eyes. Not written by me, not by the diary, but by whatever existed behind the third door. It wrote that I had been marked to carry its consciousness, that the third door wasn't opening simply to consume me. It was opening to pass something on, to implant a piece of itself into me, to make me the living memory of every soul it had devoured. A tremor ran through my entire body. The world tilted with the breath of the creature behind the door. Cold wind slashed across my skin like needles of ice. I felt something pouring into my mind, a flood of memories, a tide of souls rushing into my skull like water into a drowning chamber. Crying, begging, screaming, voices calling names I had never heard, all merging into a single storm tearing through my head. I screamed, but my body didn't respond. My eyes stretched wide, my muscles shook violently. Veins darkened across my face, forming patterns like ancient symbols I had never seen. I saw visions that weren't mine. Another room, another writer, another death, then another, each memory belonging to someone the diary had swallowed. Each one ending the same way, their identity consumed, their life erased, their soul becoming part of the third door's collective. My mind felt like it was splitting into pieces, each fragment containing the memory of a stranger who had died long before me. The keeper stood behind me, not retreating anymore. He stood tall, unmoving, all of his eyes open wide, not watching me, but watching through me, watching what was coming. The third door opened wider, so wide I couldn't tell where the door ended, and the darkness began. Its presence crushed my chest as if a mountain had fallen onto me. My consciousness slipped, sliding out of my body like the breath of a drowning man. I was being swallowed whole, and in that instant, I understood something. Not hope, not strength, but truth. If I was consumed, I wouldn't vanish. I would continue to exist inside it, not as a victim, but as part of it. A fragment of its endless awareness, a living archive of every erased soul. And then I realized the most terrible part. It didn't want me dead. It wanted me alive. Inside of it, my final breath shuddered out. A breath like someone sinking beneath a deep, black sea. Then I wrote, and the entire world exploded into light and darkness merging as one. Light and darkness collided like opposing forces trying to tear reality apart. My chest tightened, my heart pounding so violently it felt as if it wanted to break free from my rib cage. I no longer knew whether I was standing, floating, or suspended in nothingness. My senses were shredded and reassembled in the wrong order. I heard my own bones hum like struck glass. A frigid chill crawled into my marrow. Strange memories that were not mine, rushed through my veins like a new kind of blood. Then everything went silent. Every sound in the room vanished. No more screaming, no more whispering, no more breathing. Only one thing remained. The absolute stillness of death. I opened my eyes, or maybe they had never closed. I stood inside a space that no longer resembled my room. There were no walls, no floor, no ceiling, only an endless black void where time stopped moving and gravity no longer mattered. Before me stood the entity behind the third door. It stood at a distance that felt unnatural, as though space itself had bent to position us face to face. It was no longer formless darkness. It was taking shape. A shape that never stayed the same. A headless human silhouette one moment, a massive distorted face the next, then a swirling vortex swallowing every trace of light, then a mass of spider-like limbs crawling across invisible ground. But one thing remained constant. Every time its shape changed, I saw faces move beneath its shifting surface, tiny, trapped faces, each belonging to a soul absorbed into its being. It was them, and they were it. I couldn't look away, not because I wanted to see it, because it forced me to see. A voice echoed not in my ears, but directly inside my mind, rising from the deepest trench of human consciousness. It told me I had been chosen, not to be devoured, but to inherit, to become the next bearer of the pen, the next writer of the laws of the in-between realm. I stepped back on instinct. Immediately, the invisible ground beneath me cracked, splitting into hundreds of glowing red fissures. Each glowing crack pulsed like the eyes of the trapped souls staring up at me. The diary softened in my grip. Its pages heated, then peeled away. Each page floated into the air and disintegrated, until only a hovering crimson core remained glowing between us. It was no longer my diary. It was its diary, the diary of the third door. My heartbeat changed, syncing with the entity's own unnatural rhythm. Panic surged through me as I tried to reclaim control, to stop the darkness from consuming my thoughts piece by piece. But it was already too late. A sentence appeared inside my head. before I even formed a thought. It said I was the next writer, the one destined to finish the diary, the one who would guide the next souls, the one who would reopen the door for those who followed. I gripped the pen, my entire body shaking. I screamed in defiance, writing a sentence into the air, the words tearing across the void like crimson lightning. I wrote that I refuse. I wrote that I am not the chosen one. I wrote that I do not belong to darkness. Reality shattered around me. A sound like thousands of panes of glass breaking roared through the void. The entity stalled. Its shifting body recoiled as if burned. For the first time, I heard it scream, a soundless scream that still ripped through my skull. I had enraged it. Giant shadow arms erupted from the invisible floor, gripping my legs and arms, wrenching me backward. Pain seared through my bones, white hot and blinding. It stepped closer, each movement fracturing the space around it. My consciousness felt as if it were being crushed into dust, but I still had the pen, and the pen could still write. I gathered every last piece of myself, every memory, every breath, every shred of willpower I still owned. I lifted the pen and I wrote what might be the final sentence of my life. The light from the pen's tip flared like a blade slicing through the darkness. My hand trembled violently, every finger numb, but I continued to write. Each word appeared as if seared into the air with burning metal, leaving streaks of crimson light behind it. My heart felt clamped in an iron grip, but whatever remained of my will clung to life with everything it had left. When the sentence was complete, the space in front of me shattered like broken glass. The light radiating from my writing expanded in a circle, reaching the edge of the entity rushing toward me. It stopped. Its entire form quivered, held in place by an invisible force. Hundreds of faces embedded in its body turned toward me at once, their wide, shaking eyes reflecting panic. For the first time, I saw fear in it, not because I was stronger, but because I had written the one thing it could not tolerate. I had written its name, not a word, not a sound, but a form, a pulse, a pattern of consciousness that existed only in the in-between realm, a name that could not be spoken by the living but could be inscribed by sheer will, and that alone forced it to recoil. A shriek burst inside my skull like metal scraping across stone. The darkness inside its body cracked into spiraling storms. The shadowy arms restraining me jerked away so suddenly that I stumbled forward, freed from their crushing grip. It screamed not through sound, but through thousands of psychic echoes that tore through my mind. The world around me shook as though reality itself were collapsing. I lifted my head and stared back at it. I knew I was dying. Every second drained more of me, but I also knew I had one chance left, the only chance to keep it trapped forever. I raised the pen for the final time. Every movement of my hand felt like ripping my body in half. But I wrote that the third door must close. I wrote that the entity must return inside. I wrote that every devoured soul must be freed. I wrote that the diary must end with me immediately. Immediately, the void detonated in a burst of red light. The third door contracted violently. The entity convulsed, its entire form twisting as if being dragged into a collapsing star. The arms, the faces, the memories all screamed as they were sucked backward into the abyss behind the door. A massive shadow hand reached out one last time, desperate to seize me. Its swirling head lunged forward, trying to devour the last fragment of my consciousness. The ground beneath me splintered into thousands of glowing red fractures. I felt my body being yanked toward the darkness, but the final sentence I had written blazed like a sun in the void. A piercing crack split the air, not the entity's sound. The sound of the door slamming shut. The third door collapsed inward with the force of a falling meteor. The darkness folded into itself. The entity vanished in an instant. The world erupted into blinding light. I tumbled backward, falling endlessly, passing through layers of memory, layers of fractured time, layers of twisting space. Everything blurred until only a white void remained. I opened my eyes, my breath returned, my heart thumped a fragile, faint beat. I stood inside my old rented room. The room was normal again. The diary lay motionless on the floor. No glow, no pulse, no voice. I picked it up. It was completely blank. No writing, no marks, no memories, except for the very last page, where a single sentence remained. Not written by me, not written by the entity, but written by all the souls freed at once. The sentence said, "Everything ends when the storyteller chooses to end it." I don't know if I survived, or if I died and simply haven't realized it yet, but I know one truth. The third door is closed, the diary has ended, and I have written the story of the dead to its final breath.